is our first series in our business culture series, really helping you adapt to the local Israeli culture. And I have a really special guest tonight, Osnat Lautman, and I'm so excited you've joined us. And Osnat is a cross-cultural expert. She's an organizational advisor. We've known her for years, and she does really cool work with companies and coaching about how to do all this cultural immersion, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. All of you know Citizen Café as the place to learn Hebrew, but our focus is never just Hebrew. It's about getting you to feel so connected to Israelis. And well, when you work with them, that's when you really have to deal with Israelis, right? So everything about this series is not about Hebrew, but it's about getting you to get that extra special spark, to know exactly what to say, to feel more comfortable coming from your own culture, how to deal with all these challenges. Israelis are nuts sometimes, and there's all these cliches about them. We're going to talk about them tonight, and we want to hear from you guys, okay? So keep writing. I want to hear where you guys are all from. We're gonna, we actually have so many questions that have come in before tonight. We're gonna answer them, your questions, and keep writing to us questions live. We're gonna do our best to answer them, okay? So I just wanna see again, any students of ours that are studying Hebrew with us, give me a big CC or a big like, I wanna know. Beautiful, okay, I'm watching. Oh yeah, CC in the house, I love it, fantastic. All right, cool. So, I mean, I really want to get started. We don't have a lot of time. We've got so much to cover, and we want to hear from you guys as well. And keep also writing questions throughout if things aren't clear to you. We want to try and answer as many real questions from you guys, but we also have questions that have come in before. And to get kind of, I want to dive right into it.
Let's do it.
Do you think we can do it?
I
All right,
so.
cool. It's Citizen Cafe, so I always have to say, grab a cup of coffee. This is going to be a super interesting talk. Okay, so I hold on saying Munich. I just want to see all the countries everyone's from. Amazing, Germany,
Amazing.
Israel, in
Actually,
Ashkelon even. Fantastic. I love it. All right, so keep writing to us. All right, and if you're in Tel Aviv, come past our, well, you can't actually come past our campus because it's not safe, is it? Okay, well, it doesn't matter. So, Osnat. We both do a lot of coaching on cultural differences, and it's so much fun because usually, like, I have guests that talk about different things, but this is my favorite topic because if you don't connect and like engage with people, then it doesn't matter if you speak Hebrew. Nothing matters because you feel disconnected. And I moved around a lot. Tell me about how you became someone who's an expert in cross-cultural immersion and coaching. Because you do have an interesting story as well.
I don't know if it's interesting or not, but anyhow, we'll start by saying that I'm very happy to be here and see all the chats and the people coming in South Africa and in Munich, right, and whatever.
Keep writing.
Morocco, Barcelona, all over, and it's amazing. So I will try to concentrate and answer the question. It's part of me, by the way, of being an Israeli, jumping from one subject to another, right? But I will start by saying that I'm an organizational consultant and my expertise is cross-cultural communication, mainly the Israeli business culture and the gaps to other cultures around the globe. And I work as an organizational consultant since 2007. And actually, a few years ago, my husband got a job offer, and we moved to live in Hoboken, in New Jersey. So if anyone from Hoboken, New Jersey, that will be amazing for me.
No, but I used to live in New Jersey. That's really cool. I didn't know that, actually.
You didn't know that?
Mention that. Okay, cool.
Well,
all right.
Maybe you didn't listen, but I don't know. Anyhow, Hoboken.
I think that's also Israeli, right?
Anyhow, so Hoboken is an amazing place. 5 minutes from Manhattan, beautiful view. We lived there for 4 years, my husband, myself, our children. I used to work in an American global company over there, and I used to study in NYU. And actually, over there, I realized that the cultural gap is much bigger than I thought. So my direct manager at the company, the American one, she actually didn't like the way I thought or behaved. I would come across with like an interesting idea and she didn't like it. I used to go to the higher manager with a new approach and they really didn't appreciate that.
That won't work.
A lot of multitasking, which they didn't appreciate too. So it was kind of weird to me. How come in one country, in Israel, I can teach other people how to give service, how to sell, and then when I get to a new culture, they actually don't appreciate the way I behave. And all that was a decade ago. And since then, and I started back then to research the topic of cross-cultural communication. And I actually over there interviewed 350 people, began in Hoboken, but then moved to all over the world. And I asked people if they can share with me their experience working with Israelis. So I don't know if it's a fascinating story, but actually many people in the audience, they probably think of moving to Israel. So I can share with them a lot of stories because I know how is it to move to a new country, to practice new language and new culture.
So how many of you, can you just do a quick thumbs up if you're thinking about making Aliyah or coming to Israel, just so we get an idea of how many of you are actually, kind of dealing with these questions, you're not here yet. So
I'm in New Jersey. Hi, John.
I have a
You're in
question
Jersey.
from our Instagram live. It's
Good.
asking what makes you Tel Avivian?
What makes us Tel Avivian?
Yeah.
Well, first, what makes us Israeli? Let's go step by step.
I love that question. First of all, I mean, we're in Tel Aviv, right? I mean, that's the essential
Right. Well,
prerequisite of being a Tel
It's a
Avivian.
bubble.
But to be honest, there's something. Tel Avivian is actually a cultural thing. It's very much a
Right.
cultural thing. People ask, like, what's the difference between Tel Aviv and another city? It's a bit of a cliche, but Tel Aviv is kind of like the heart of a lot of, I would say, kind of the new type of Israel. So the liberal, this liberal lifestyle, the well-being, metropolitan lifestyle,
Great vibes.
exactly. And a lot of other cities don't feel the same. So a lot of people just kind of consider Tel Aviv kind of the quintessential new Israel, urban. I would always say very sexy. Tel Aviv is a very sexy city. And some, Jerusalem is a very historical city, a lot to do with religion. So that's to answer hopefully your question. Nachon, Osnat?
Yeah, the differences between holy and like more of a business oriented or more of a holy space.
Exactly. So, I mean, Osnat, I think what I'd love to do is kind of dive into actual questions that are so relevant that you guys sent over, and I want to have this discussion. And you guys obviously keep writing questions. Antwerpen, Rega, I just want to see. Just made Aliyah from South Africa. Fantastic, Ryan. Nice to have you. Agnes, hi. John, beautiful. So just keep in touch and keep asking questions. So I'm going to start with a first question that we got. Osnat, are you ready? And we're going to start from there. By the way, afterwards, Osnat will summarize things for you guys. She's got some great theories. She's got an amazing book. We're going to also talk about if you want to purchase it later. And the first question is, I heard connections and attitudes are more important than what I studied in school. Is that true about the Israeli culture?
Well, it's a good question. It's true to say that we're in Israel are much more person-oriented, relationship-oriented. So there are countries that are more task-oriented, meaning that it's extremely important what you're going to have in your CV, right? But in Israel, of course, it's important what you're going to have in your CV, but it's not enough. You need to build relationship with people, right?
Absolutely.
You don't know actually what I learned or what you learned, right? We know one each other and we build
Exactly.
trust by learning about, I don't know, having a small talk.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people, especially our students that come and talk to us about this stuff, and they always say that how the job interviews feel so different here.
It's true.
Right?
So I have a lot of kind of people that made Aliyah to Israel, and they come to me and they said, well, it's so difficult for me to find a job in Israel. So I said, what's the challenge? What's the problem? So I said, even in an interview, I will come to an interview and the person that interviewed me, he will ask me personal question. And I will ask him or her, why you're asking me such a question. It's not related to the job.
So it feels inappropriate for a lot of people, yeah.
Right, and they will say, well, I'm not going to answer that. And that's it. The moment you're not going to answer such a question, it's going to be the end of the business relationship, right? So, if you come to Israel, you want to get a job, you need to be more open to personal questions in a way. And don't think that it's in order to know you better and insult you or get into your private space, but actually the idea is to build trust.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a key thing to remember. Trust seems like an obvious thing that, you think all over the world is considered important, but in Israel it's just much more important. So in some cultures what you studied at school is top priority. It's important here, but not as much in a job interview as if you come and they connect with you and they can trust you. And I always use the word smell you, right? They can kind of go, this is going to be my team.
Right.
This is a
like
team
the
player.
intuition that you're going to have at the same moment with the individual that's sitting next to you.
So, and that's the word. I think intuition is something Israelis use so much more than many other cultures. If they don't have a good gut feeling about you, it doesn't matter if you studied in Harvard or whatever, they don't want you in the team because something's not going to work there. A lot of work with Israelis is built on that. So yes, I would say that connections and attitude are much more important than what you did at school. Not belittling what you did at school, but
it doesn't mean that you don't have to study. Of course, that's the entrance to the interview.
Yep.
But the moment you are there, that's it. It's not important anymore. Then you need to build your identity in front of the people that actually ask you the questions in an interview.
Exactly. Do you guys relate to this? Do you have if you share with us if you've had experiences that you kind of went to a job interview and you kind of realized that it wasn't about your CV? They were actually really wanting to get to know you. And I want to also mention about what you mentioned, Osnat, about asking personal questions. This is such a huge thing, and I really want everyone to note this down. You will be asked personal questions in job interviews that you might never be asked in other cultures, might even be illegal to ask about other cultures, not because in the sense of harassment, in the sense of like children and like things like that are family stuff. In the United States, you can never ask these things, right?
By the way, it's even illegal in Israel, but people do it.
Okay, well there you go, exactly.
Right?
And here, they're not trying exactly to pick on your privacy or to make you feel uncomfortable. It's a normal thing. It's a very kind of, people from Latin cultures can relate to that, but certainly people that come from European cultures and American cultures always have an issue with it. They're curious. I can see you guys writing. They ask very personal questions like relationship statuses. They want to know how committed you are maybe to Israel. They want to know why you're here. A lot of Israelis tend to be curious about why did you come here, for example? Why are you interested in us, And so I have here Patrick asking, can you give us an example of those questions? Absolutely.
How old are you, Tamar?
How old are you?
How many children do you have?
Exactly.
Why do you live outside of Tel Aviv?
Are you married? Are you single? Are you divorced? Or, status?
I don't like your T-shirt. Who asked you? Who are you? Do I know you? Plenty of
hobbies,
questions.
just like a lot of questions that you might, and there's a reason. They're just trying to get you, just like you. It's almost like you imagine you're going on a first date, and in dates it's different because it is personal, and you're trying to figure out this is the person you can connect to. Right. They actually care about the same connection. Imagine you're on a first date with that person. It's a bit odd. Okay, just don't ask them for a drink. All right, so Guitar saying they are trying to understand if you can be part of their camp. Absolutely, absolutely. You won't get into it, but I talk a lot about camps and stuff. Mm-hmm. So you ready for the next question, Osnat? Are you guys ready? We're going to move on to the next question.
All right.
How can I, as an international, really succeed in an Israeli work environment? It's a good question. I heard everything is messy and unpredictable, and I'm really used to my responsibilities being defined and organized in my workplace.
Well, it's true. It's a lot about going with the flow and not having a direct kind of what you need to do, but actually open your mind to new ideas, say your own opinion. It's look unprofessional and a bit messy, but in the Israeli culture, it's the way that we expect people to behave. Kind of coming with the new ideas, being proactive, as you said, less process oriented, but more kind of new ideas and multitasking too into the work arena.
Absolutely. And I would, the word messy, I think it's a great word in the question because Israeli work environment can feel messy to people, but that messiness has a lot of advantages and disadvantages. But the thing is, it doesn't feel messy to Israelis.
Messy also in the way we interact one another, the same as I
Absolutely.
did right now.
Absolutely.
You spoke and I just get into
That
the
was so
dialogue.
rude.
Sorry to do that. You probably already got used to it somehow.
I do it all the time. So messy means that managers don't necessarily see, you might have certain responsibilities in your work, and then they could suddenly ask you for other things that were not your original responsibilities, and you're expected to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, like you mentioned, like process and structures are not the Israeli speciality, I should say. But also that messiness means that you have a lot of opportunities. You have a lot of opportunities to do stuff that you might not do in cultures that have a very unmessy process and a very organized
It's part
one.
of us of being such an innovation country.
Exactly. Spontaneity, the ability to kind of go to, like we'll talk about it later, but more senior people, or to actually step out of your job requirements and do something that might interest you and actually attract some attention in the company. You can basically use that messiness to your advantage, but don't be surprised if you're expected to do stuff that's not your actual responsibility. In London, that's being asked. Just looking at your questions. Cool, beautiful. Just keep writing to us. We're seeing everything. Fantastic.
They even ask about
I'm going to move on to the next question, okay? Guys, I'm waiting for more questions from you. What's up with the Israelis and yelling? How many of you kind of have issues with Israelis yelling, or have experienced a situation where you're like, why are they yelling right now? And what am I missing here? That's the question of Osnat.
So it's interesting that actually you mentioned yelling as as part of the Israelis' behavior. Well, I have an acronym that actually a model that I use to express or to show the main Israeli business culture characteristics. And one of the main Israeli characteristics is actually being loud. But now loud not only on yelling at one another, but also of the intense life that we have in Israel. And intense life is in getting cell phones, no separation between personal life and business life, in a way, a business arena. As we said, asking personal questions, coming close to one another. The way me and you sit right now is kind of close to one another, especially in COVID-19 period of time. What else? It's all that gives you a sense of loudness. I think so. It's absolutely part of the
Absolutely.
Israelis characteristics.
So how many of you have experienced that loudness? Let us know. Yeah.
Okay.
So exactly. Then we're here also on Instagram or Facebook, so we're seeing comments from everywhere. That loudness is really something to remember, that it's a part of this kind of impulsiveness and the ability to just express yourself. I actually have so many people constantly telling me, I was in a meeting and they were screaming, and then they were hugging, and then they seemed really happy about the meeting. But why would you be happy about a meeting that somebody just screamed at?
True.
And that volume is a very different volume than many other cultures, and it's normal. It's almost like it was a heated discussion isn't necessarily a negative discussion. It's more like, I told you what I think, and she told me what I thought. In there, yes, 24/7. Oh, in everyday life. There you go. So
Actually, I remember, and I shared with you once that back in Hoboken, I met an American guy that actually shared with me that he used to work for a startup company, an American one, and his company was acquired by a global Israeli company. And the first time he came to Israel, he was shocked. He told me that it doesn't look the same way as it's seen in CNN news, and he was very impressed by the buildings, the roads, the people. And then he arrived to the meetings, and after a few minutes after the meeting just starts, the two Israelis that sat next to him started to argue about one of the topics. And of course they switched from English to Hebrew. So Sam, that's the name of the American guy, he couldn't understand what they spoke about. But actually, from looking at the hand gestures and the tone and the yelling, he thought that that's the end of the business relationship between them. And after a few minutes of yelling at one another, they stopped. The meeting was over. They put one hand on top of the other shoulders and switched back to English and said, "Well, Sam and the other guy, what we're gonna have for lunch?" And that's it. And Sam actually met me 4 years later, and he was still having, he said, "Well, I'm having a cultural shock. How can you speak to someone like that and still everything can be okay?" So that's the way it is.
Absolutely. I think that's a great example. Yelling is a part of it. Don't get intimidated by it. You don't have to fake it and do it yourself, but just know that it's not personal. Never take it personally. It's kind of a volume notch that's just so much higher here. But again, it's much more than just being loud. It's that passionate communication.
It's the emotion expressiveness in a way.
Absolutely,
Right?
absolutely. All right, guys. Loudness. If you give big L, like a big L, if you've had
What
issues
is
with
the 100?
agreeing with us, 100.
Oh,
It's like the
100 agree.
100%.
Get you.
That's what they do
100.
on social media.
Sorry. Well,
All right, cool. Let's go to the next question. I heard the Israeli way is a lot about risk taking. What does that look like in the workplace? So, risk taking in the workplace, the Israeli way. What would you say, Osnat?
Well, amazing. It's also part of my main characteristics of the Israeli culture. So we are risk takers. So if in other cultures we will have a very good idea, then we're going to have a long process examining that, and then execution. In Israel, we kind of missing the process part. It's not that we don't have it.
Totally.
No. Let's be nice with, the serious people in Israel, the
You're right.
professional people. We skip it from. It's much older,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So we don't have the process part, and if we have a very good idea, we'll jump into the execution part, and from different point of views, that will be taking a risk in a way.
Yep.
Without actually having all the calculations that you should have.
Exactly. And actually, I think in the question itself lies the answer. You perceive a lot of things that are risk-taking that Israelis don't see as a risk-taking. So that means that not trying things is the biggest failure in Israeli
Right.
culture. Risk-taking is what you should be doing, and trying things, because there is no such thing about a failure. So the Israeli way is, you think something might work, go and do it. Who cares if it doesn't work? We'll do something else. This is
Right.
why we're such a spontaneous. This is why we're Startup Nation.
You
to
lose
be honest,
some, you win some.
Yeah,
But as long as
absolutely.
you try, that's the idea.
Exactly. And I think that in the workplace, you'll see that your boss will appreciate you trying stuff.
Right. You get the
Commu-
credit for trying.
Absolutely. And just kind of being over safe doesn't necessarily help you. And you see that in, people here, if you're in the business sector, about like lean startups, and you see that that's also a global trend about don't take so much time thinking about stuff, start trying it, taste it, like test it and see how things go. And that's very much the Israeli mentality, and why a lot of people like to work with Israelis at the beginning of startups, because that's when you need that pace, and
Right.
unless later on when the companies grow, then that Israeli business culture, it doesn't always actually serve the companies, but I think at the starting point
That's the idea.
our forte.
I think it's important that you mentioned that it's not about a culture that it's better than the other. It's about working diversity and understanding that the whole is bigger than the sum of its parts. So if you know the advantage of the Israeli culture, that we can improvise, that we take risk, right? All that. You can use that at a specific moment when you build your startup, but later on, when you go bigger, you need to think strategically to the long run. You need to look into the small details. Then you need some other cultures. Maybe the people from Munich over here can help us. So that's the idea of having the whole bigger than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. Well said. And I see Tara saying it's all about the instincts and the persistent. Absolutely. And the Israeli way is really about feeling your way through and not being stuck on facts.
Right.
So we've got Majdi here saying, I believe that risk factor is always a challenge, and yes, you are right, and it leads to positive direction on the long run. Toda rabba. You're welcome. Cool, beautiful. Let's move on to our second last question. Just how formal or informal should I be with Israelis when discussing work-related tasks or businesses? What a great question. informal and formal.
Right. So comparing to other countries, let's say if we're looking at a spectrum from being an informal or formal, of course Israel is at the edge of being informal. Actually, there is a researcher called Gerrit Hofstede. He's from the Netherlands, and he spoke about the term power distance. So power distance, that's the degree of importance that you give to someone that is older than you or senior than you at work. So he actually made his research in IBM, and he realized that in each branch around the globe, there is a different culture. So the range goes from 0 to 100, and the higher you get, the higher formality you are, the higher power distance. So guess what's the rank that Israeli actually
What do you guys think?
So if you're from
I
Germany
guess?
or South Africa,
So-
or maybe you can guess, or from US, you can guess the rank from 0 to 100. So I'm going to share the results for you, and you also can Google that. So actually, Israel got 13. So 13, it's almost the lower rank around the globe, meaning that you, of course, you approach your manager in a private name, right? First name.
Yeah, first name
So
basis.
it can be Yossi or Avi, but in the US it's going to be also first name. It's going to be John, or I don't know, James, whatever. But the difference will be that you will feel comfortable with your manager to disagree with him in front of other people. And one note to say, that it's not mislead you to understand that at the end of the day we have only one manager that actually will decide what we're going to do. But you can say whatever you want.
Absolutely.
And that's part of the innovation, of challenging the idea, make a product better than it is.
Absolutely. I have so many conversations with British people who, when they disagree, they say, you're absolutely right about
Right.
this, and then they disagree. So it's kind of like in Israel, you wouldn't have to start by saying you were
So-
absolutely. You don't have to kind of polish up your disagreeing.
And Tamar, what's going to happen with those British people when they're going to tell the majority of the Israelis, well, that's wonderful. What's the Israelis going to understand? Literally, that's
That's
wonderful,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
So my recommendation, if you want Israelis that they will understand you, try to be more direct with them.
Yeah.
So it's not only translating the language, but also translating the culture too.
Absolutely. And in informality, I also want to touch and maybe add, Osnat, that there's dress code, for example. So,
Right.
Informalities in the Israeli culture are so obvious in how people dress. You would just you'd never wear a suit and a tie almost, even at the kind of the professions that
It's like a custom for us to,
yeah.
to
If you do wear a suit and a tie, you just look like someone just landed off a plane from somewhere else.
But maybe if you're a lawyer
Perhaps,
or you work in a
perhaps, you're
bag
right.
and right, it depends.
And it's
also.
still quite casual. There's still like a way to do it casually.
That's true.
Um,
I have a nice story, not about wearing. I do have some stories about that, but we'll skip it for now. Just before the corona started, a delegation from Belgium arrived to Israel, all CEOs, and I share with them. I gave them a presentation about the Israeli business culture, and I spoke about power distance, which I just spoke about. And one of the CEOs, a lady, she told me that she actually gave a lecture in one of the high-tech companies in Israel. And after the lecture, an Israeli girl, approached to her and he said, "Listen, the lecture was amazing, and we must collaborate." So I came to her and said, "Okay, well, she was, enthusiastic in a way with the lecture." She said, "Yes, but I will never." The Belgian lady said, "Well, I will never collaborate with her." Do you know why?
Why?
Because speaking about power distance, Belgium have a rank of 64, and Israelis are 13. In other words, she was trying to tell me, who is she that she will tell me what to do? What do you mean by we must collaborate?
Gotcha. Oh wow,
Right?
interesting.
You need to translate again the culture. So instead of we must collaborate, what can you say?
I would like to.
And even softer.
Perhaps.
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 Question mark at the end. What do you think? Maybe we could
Interesting.
collaborate.
Got it.
Because she's higher than her in the hierarchy. So
Got
how can
it.
you tell me what to do?
Interesting. Okay, there I learned something. Okay. So yeah, I mean, informality comes across in how we dress. Like we said, informality in Israeli culture comes across in hierarchy or lack of hierarchy, I should say. You do have a boss. You do have a natural respect you don't want to forget. But you are able to talk to senior people. You can be a junior. You can talk to the CEO of a company. All these opportunities exist when things are informal. So you want to use it to your advantage.
Right.
And informality in how you speak and communicate, so you don't have to be over polite. You're actually much more respected in Israeli work cultures when you just say what's on your mind, even if you disagree. And I always say you can actually get extra credit and even stand out if you can do it in a respectful way within a company
Right.
meeting and actually bring a better idea or disagree with something in a respectful way. People will feel like, okay, that person has something to say. That person's thinking. He's a thinker. He's you know,
He cares.
He
He actually
cares.
care
He's
about
driven, and especially if it's a good idea, I think you'll get a lot of credit for it. So I think that informality exists, and you can definitely use it to your advantage. And the last question, I know Israelis are quite direct, but how should I talk with my managers? So we kind of touched on that, but you want maybe to expand
Right,
just a little bit more?
because we spoke about informality and formality, and this question actually brings me to to think about the fact that non-Israelis, when they think about informality in Israel, sometimes they don't respect the manager, right? So you need to be careful with that. That's true that we're informal, but you need to think what you say. So my recommendation is, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, that we will listen more and speak less. So at the beginning, when you make Aliyah to Israel, try to copy other people. Try to see what you can say, how to approach your managers. So try to be a learner at the beginning.
I think it's a good idea. There is a tendency that I also find with a lot of internationals that move to Israel or work with Israelis that they think there's a certain way to do it, and they do it quite forcefully. So they try to be like informal. They try to do it. So don't fake it. Be who you are. If you come from a culture that you're very respectful, that's fine. Just remember that authenticity and kind of really communicating freely is important, because what happens when you don't is that your manager, and that's kind of, I guess, the main question, can't understand what you really want, cannot understand what you're trying to say, can understand if you have a problem at work. They want to solve your problems, and they expect you, just like, because in an Israeli work environment, Israelis will always tell their bosses what they think, what they need. I'm not happy. I need a break. I'm gonna sit. And if you don't, you'll just be missed, because they don't know how to anticipate it or guess it. Because in maybe in the culture you come from, nobody does it, and then that's just the way it's done. So just remember, you will get a lot if you just kind of try to communicate
you know
better.
what interesting, so there are companies that I'm working with for a few years already, and I do recommend them to use more of a direct style of speech when they speak with us. So what they told me after, let's say I met them after a year or so, after a workshop, we did another workshop. So one of them told me that actually when she tried to give a constructive criticism to an Israeli and be direct, the Israeli didn't know how to accept that. Meaning, if you're coming from another culture, how come you being direct right now? So my recommendation, if you feel that Israelis are too direct with you, but they can't get your directness, try to tell them from time to time a sentence that will be kind of an opening to the dialogue, meaning, let me be the Israeli now, and then be direct. You know what
Good,
I mean?
absolutely, good. Because Israeli sense that it's not natural for everybody. And
Right,
that's
like,
actually,
what's going
that's
on?
very
You're
good.
being
That's-
polite,
that's
and now
good.
you're too rude to me. So
Yeah.
make a sentence in advance. Let me be the Israeli now, and then say it out loud.
And I always use the jungle metaphor. Remember, you don't want to come across aggressive when you try to be that direct, authentic that we talk about, because that actually comes across not well with Israelis. They can react badly to it. So when you do communicate, you want to do it softly. You don't want to do it aggressively. You don't want the opposite or the counter effect of what you're trying to do. So you want to do it with style. You want to do it with your style. Be who you are. So be authentic and direct.
That's exactly a comment that we just got. Be
Yourself.
yourself.
Yeah, and
And
communication.
communication should be always transparent.
Absolutely, Maggie.
Agree on that. That's nice.
So Osnat, maybe we can now we're done with the questions, and we're always here to take more questions, guys. Maybe tell us a little bit about I love how in your book you took the word Israeli and made 7 really accurate acronyms about Israeli characteristics, and I really want to take a moment and go through them. If you'll have to spell Israeli by yourself, everybody, and let's go through them.
Okay,
Maybe.
let's try and do that.
Okay, so first letter.
So if you imagine the word Israeli, right? And I use it as an acronym in a way that each letter is actually the beginning of one of the Israelis' main characteristics. Okay? Ready? So we have Israeli
I.
informal, right? Not only in the way we dress, but also in the way we communicate with one another. And then Israeli we have
S.
straightforward, because we use
Oh,
a
that's a
direct
good one.
style of speech,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then is
R.
risk takers.
Risk takers. Everything we spoke about. It's amazing. Okay.
Are
A.
ambitious.
We didn't touch on that a lot, but that's a huge
But-
point. Israelis are ambitious. They're
Right.
hungry. They're hungry in their essence. They don't even know what for sometimes, but they're very hungry.
I think it's not something that we touched about in this conversation, but it's part of the history.
Yep.
It's part of the fact that we say to ourselves, never again. So if it's go with the flow of the acronym, so we have R, risk takers, A, ambitious, and E, entrepreneurial. And actually I see these 3 as one unit,
Yeah.
because an entrepreneur is someone that will have a very good idea, and he or she will do everything in order to get to that specific goal. A lot of risk taking and ambitious.
Yeah, and I think calling Israeli culture entrepreneurial is so accurate. There's so many elements to being an entrepreneur. That's why actually we lack a lot of things. Entrepreneurs, for example, are not known to be great managers, for example. So it's not about if this is a compliment or not. It's just a characteristic thing. Okay, so
And
we've
then
done E and
L,
then L. What's
which
L
we
for?
spoke about.
Can anybody guess? What's the L for? It's
We
the
met-
first thing we talked about.
Anyone?
All right, it's
Loud.
loud, right? Okay,
Right?
I
Not
guess that.
only the voices, but as I said before, the intense life in Israel. And the last I is improvisational, because we always try to think outside of the box.
And improvisational can sometimes catch you off guard because, like we said, remember, improvisation means Israelis are not always structured. Improvising is a huge thing, and sometimes improvisation leads to surprising new ideas. And so it's actually just a thing that a cultural take that this is how a lot of new things are born. And so it's impulsive, it's raw. When we do talks about dating, for example, everyone's so I want to meet you in 10 minutes, or I want to come meet my mom after one date. This is all a part of stuff that can happen, and it's like I said, not to be offensive. It's very much all the I love these
As we
acronyms
said.
Israeli, and we'll have it if anybody wants. We'll write it out afterwards. Yes, Vera, we've got loud because we spoke a lot about loud in the beginning, but this loudness of the culture. Hi, Sweden. I can see you, Chris. Cool.
Israeli.
Yes, we did the acronyms for Israeli with an I at the end.
We can
exactly.
share all with later on.
Where's the book? Where's the book?
The book is here.
Oh, it's
with
here.
me.
So also you can see, I'm going to share with you guys, this is a best-selling book. This is Osnat published, Israeli business culture. You can get it. We'll send the link as well at the end of this. And it has everything from the history of why Israelis behave a certain way, and all the cultural gaps to understand the acronyms we spoke about. So this is a great book. I love it. I've learned a lot. I do a lot of these coaching as well. I learned a lot from Osnat over the last few years. And so anything on a last note, Osnat? What do you think? What's the last tip we can share with everybody before we end our live tonight?
I don't know. Few tips. We said be direct. Try to be direct. Use the let me be the Israeli now. Try to subdivide any project into smaller pieces that you will have a control about what's going on, because we improvise all the time. So if you need your control about the project, try to make it into smaller pieces in a way. What else? If you send an email, remember that English is our second language. Don't judge me and others for doing mistakes in English. So try to write a shorter email, and if you want to add some other documentation, maybe add that as an attachment. What else? Many things. I don't know. Everything is in the book. Feel free to contact me or Tamar directly.
Absolutely.
Right? Any question you may
Hans
have.
asking where can the book be ordered? Can it be ordered on Amazon, and we'll put the
Right,
link
we will
soon
send
so
you
you
a
can
link.
so you can purchase it. And I want to add to that. I think it's great. I remember once I did a workshop, and a lovely girl from Switzerland said, but I went to this interview, or applied. Sorry, she didn't go to the interview. I applied, and I waited so patiently and politely to be called back, and I never was called back. And I'm like, you might not be called back, but if you have the understanding that it's not about just waiting for the process. Maybe back in Switzerland you only apply and you have to wait. Here in Israel you want to do everything you can. If you by chance have, I always say this, they have the number of somebody in the company you really want to work for, or a contact. In Israel, it's appropriate to contact them politely, but try and use contacts, because we're a tribal culture. And remember this, if you don't come from a tribal culture, and it's hard for you to understand, what it means is that the connection is key. It's the top of the hierarchy. So you always want to try and find a connection to somebody in the company, because then that person recruiting will always prefer to hire someone that somebody in the company knows, because it's given you points of having more trust, or I can trust that person more because my other manager knows them. So try create the link, even in a conversation, because they feel so much more comfortable knowing that there's a link between you two.
And it takes time to build relationship with people. I mean, be patient with that. When I opened my consulting services, I opened it back in the States, and I thought that when I will arrive to Israel, everyone would like to work with me because I have so much experience to share. But nobody contacted me, and it took time until I met the right people and they get to know you. So we started with relationship, and we ending the session with relationship, right? Because that's the most important thing. That's in the way build trust.
Absolutely. Wow, guys. Okay, so any more questions, you can always contact us. I'm going to show the book, Osnat's book again, and we're going to send you a link. I love it. And if you really feel like you need a boost in how to deal with Israelis, you can use it. We have a whole series coming up, and we're going to talk about how to do interviews, and we always kind of talk about the different things that you need in order to be successful in Israeli culture. And of course, if you want to take a leap and jump and improve your Hebrew, we'd love to have you join at Citizen Café. There's so many ways to get in touch with us. You can just write us on the Facebook, get a free introduction session with one of our teachers. It's a lot of fun, trust me, and kind of discover what you can do. We teach online globally, all over the world, in hours that we've never had before. So you can be in the States and study in the evenings, so you'd be surprised. So this is a great time to connect to Israel in whichever way you want. We love questions. We're always available, so feel free to write to us. And when you're in Tel Aviv, always when COVID's a bit calmer, come and visit us in our campus on Rothschild. It's beautiful here. And so sending everybody lots of luck. You're all welcome. We hope you gained some insights into how to deal with Israelis in business culture, whether you're trying to apply for a job, or whether you already have Israeli colleagues, you work in an Israeli office. We know it's challenging, but just communicate, build relationships, be authentic, dare, and remember, opportunities lie in places that might be foreign to you. Don't be stuck in kind of what your cultural mode is. Open up your mind, and beautiful things can happen. Osnat, I want to thank you so much. We've been waiting for a long time to do this, for joining us. And if you have questions to Osnat, you can also contact us, and we'll get you in touch with her. And again, amazing book. Okay, so there we go. I see someone fantastic. That's her. Got the Amazon. Amazing. So you got the link also here on the comments. Have a great evening, everybody. Sending everybody love and health from Tel Aviv.
Thank you very much.
May this epidemic be over soon, so we can all fly and see each other everywhere. Bye, shalom, ולהתראות.
תודה רבה.
ביי ביי.
ביי ביי. תודה תמר.